Welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk. Spartan Stadium, Michigan State beats Richmond 45-14 in week number 2 for the Michigan State Spartans. And a comfortable win, another comfortable win, but we all know what's on the schedule, and we're all grading this team about what's coming. And I think everyone from, most observers, a lot of fans, all the way up to Mel Tucker, with, in my opinion, probably some, I don't know if anxiety is the right word, but it's like you're cramming for an exam and it's coming and there's a lot of material to cover. Is that the idea you're getting?
Well, there's an excitement too. You look at the players and everything, and they feel like that a lot of things worked against them in that game last year. They feel like, not that they're initially caught off guard, but they got hit hard by Washington, and they were down early, and they had a lot of injuries, and they had a lot of, they had travel, and a lot of their stuff was not together. You look at the run game operation this year as opposed to last year. I don't think Michigan State's where they need to be at run game operation-wise going into this game, but I will say that they're ahead of where they were last year. I thought the run game operation for Michigan State was really bad going into that game. Of course, you didn't really know about it because in some ways Michigan State had kind of two overmatched opponents to begin the year last year. I think, the Akron game was kind of fool's gold from a pass rush standpoint, and we can talk more about that later, but Michigan State's got its work cut out for them against Washington. The thing that's ironic last year is people thought Michigan State was going to go in there last year and beat Washington, similar to like what they did against Miami. And those are apples and oranges. Washington's got a really good offensive scheme. They've got a great trigger man in Michael Penix and the best group of college wide receivers, in the western half of the country, maybe the whole country. They're comparable with what Ohio State has. And, you can say all you want about they don't have a run game. They don't need one. So there's a lot of stuff that Michigan State has to get taken care of. And, there may be some anxiety from coaches because you can't have what's happened the last 2 weeks where the offense, doesn't work for 2 series in a row. You get that against Washington. Yeah, you might have a series where it doesn't work. But you can't have it 2 in a row because to beat Washington, to compete with Washington, you have to match scores, and you can't be playing catch-up. And the difference between this year and last year for Michigan State is, in this context, if Washington put the kind of lead on Michigan State that they did a year ago, there is no way in heck with the way the clock stoppages work now, that Michigan State could come even close to them. Now they respectively inched their way back into that game last year. Yeah. But it's a 20. It's a 3 touchdown, 4 touchdown loss. Mm-hmm. Under the same circumstances this year because of the way the clock operates. So Michigan State has to get stuff going on offense earlier. They have to play well on defense early, and they have to play much better than we've seen them play in these first 2 weeks.
Noah Kim looks pretty good. Had a couple of incompletions early, got hot, 15 straight completions to end the game. A couple of those nice Noah Kim ropes. Saw that from him. Tucker feels good about Kim, not only with those throws and the arm talent, but going to the right place with the ball. And the array of receivers continues to show itself. Antonio Gates with a nice 45-yard touchdown today. Jaron Glover came out big again on that post over the middle, got drilled, hobbled off the field, went back in later. Glover and Gates is doing pretty good. Fitzpatrick turned in some good plays. Trey Mosley came back alive today. Montori Foster's a guy I expected to see a little bit more of.
Made a big play today.
Made a play on that deflection and had a nice pop pass for about 15 and had a kick return. He's not been a negative at all. It's just credit to the receivers around him that they don't have to get it from him, and others are taking more snaps. So the aerial game is we knew there was talent there. But even in regards to the opponents these 2 weeks, in my estimation, it's a little bit ahead of maybe where I thought it would be. We knew Kim had talent, needed to see it, but it's been even more eye-popping in some ways than I expected. And the receivers, we knew they had talent, but they've come along quicker, even more than I expected, albeit against this level of competition. So that's a plus. Meanwhile, like you said, the run game and the run game operation has been inconsistent. Nathan Carter's been good, but today, he's been good, but the blocking's been spotty here and there. Last week we saw a couple 4th down stoppages. Today we saw tight end blocking become hit and miss a little bit. They went to the bench, brought in Neil Hopper, made some plays, had a touchdown. Jalen Franklin, as you pointed out, spraying Nathan Carter on that 44-yard touchdown run on a real nice combination block. Secured the edge with Brandon Baldwin, then kicked out the play side linebacker. Franklin was excellent. Looked like a Wisconsin blocker on that one. That's what he used to be.
And I believe he was in there for the other 2, at least one of the other 2 touchdown runs. I know he was in there for the short one.
So there's good and bad there. Malik Carr was hot and cold there. Started out cold, and then after those two plays, came back and delivered one of his better blocks of his Michigan State career right after Hopper scored.
I'm not going to give him credit for that. I'll tell you why, because we've heard all in the off season about how he's finally bought in and is a blocker. We've talked about in the past, like with tight ends coach Ted Gilmore was talking about the fact that there's a lot of back and forth with Malik Carr, and he's finally bought in. I don't think he's bought in. If he's bought in as a blocker, you don't have to pull him off the field each of the last 2 weeks because he misses blocks, and I think that's a problem. So, Malik Carr led the team last week in targets. He only had one target today, and I think you'll see that continue. I think one of the reasons why Michigan State was better running the ball in the second half was that they went with Franklin, that they went with Evan Morris more, that they went with Tyneil Hopper. And, if Malik Carr at this stage in his career needs a wake-up call, that's unfortunate because he's talked in the offseason about how he wants to be a leader in the tight end room. A leader in the tight end room, doesn't just talk. A guy goes out there and gets it done. And if he wants to play in the NFL, he better learn how to block, because there is a baseline for blocking that you have to have in the NFL. You can't be an Ole blocker and make it in the NFL, even as a good pass catcher.
Mm-hmm. And he came out and had that good block after a quality block for a 5-yard run after Hopper was gone.
For Michigan State to beat a team like Washington or stay with a team like Washington, he doesn't need it in the second quarter. He doesn't need it in the second half. He needs it from the moment he steps on the field, and that's one of those things that I think is unfortunate. I do think it's beneficial that Michigan State has more bodies this year, because they can play like what Tom Izzo does with playing time. If you're not going to do things the right way, you're not going to play. And I think for Malik Carr, that's the only way he can get the message. At the same time, he should have it by now, and he should be better off than he is.
He has a lot of talent, and with those a lot of talent, a lot is expected.
Exactly.
And this team, like Mel Tucker says, they need everybody, and that includes Malik Carr in all areas, because he's one of the more talented guys on the roster. Needs to show it everywhere. That running back position, Jalen Berger went out with an injury today. First half, lower body. I'm not expecting him back anytime soon, Paul. On crutches after the game, getting consoled by coaches and so forth. That's a tough blow for Michigan State, because I was starting to think, this guy is a second-string running back, but a plus as a second-string running back, like a better second-string running back than most teams have in the Big Ten. Now you got your Penn States and Michigan, some of those in Ohio States that have great 1-2 combinations. Berger, 600-plus yards last year, improved as the season went along. Last week his touches were down, but when he was on the field, had an impact, and really he's coming around as a receiver.
Yeah.
Hey, that's quality. You could use that. And all of a sudden he goes down, and then, Nathan Carter has a good game. You take him out, you put Jordan Simmons in, and, fumbles his first carry, return for a touchdown. And all of a sudden the running back situation is like, wow. Now Davion Prim goes in for the first carry of his career. Has 3 good carries, 4th one fumbles. So Tucker not happy about that for obvious reasons. They put in Joseph Martinez, a walk-on. Running back situation, I'm not expecting Berger out there. Simmons is going to be number 2 next week. Carter is a guy that, runs hard, and you can't really expect him to run hard and get 25 carries. I know he didn't have 25 today, but he can't log it 25 times a week for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I don't know how many carries he's going to get against Washington. You go back, and if this is a game where Michigan State's playing from behind, he might not get that many carries. But at the same time, we talked about this during the offseason. We had several times where, people, I know I get text messages, DMs from people that are like, hey, you guys are talking about running back depth too much, blah, blah, blah. They're going to be fine. The guys that got rid of are garbage, blah, blah, blah. Well, this is why we were talking about that, because you're one injury away from not having a running back. I mean, Michigan State is very, very close. If Nathan Carter goes down, they're going to be where Iowa was a few years ago, or Martinez isn't going to get the job done. I did think that Davion Prim, until he fumbled, he looked okay, but those aren't real answers. Jordan Simmons has never been a real answer here. He's been a career backup at best. This year, his primary role was as a pass protector. Nothing more than a pass protector, but he's not going to get the job done. And Nate Carter, I do believe that he's kind of he's in excellent condition. I believe he's durable, but running back is a position where guys get beat up all the time. And if you Mel Tucker said as much after his press conference tonight. You got to have more than one running back, and so the thing that I was hopeful of is that Jaron Mangum would come back, but then during warm-ups, he's warming up just like he did last week, and then he's limping off the field. So we don't know if Jaron Mangum is going to be available. and that's going to be a problem because Michigan State does not have quality at the running back position. Aside from Nathan Carter right now, with Berger out, with Mangum out, and Jordan Simmons. Yeah, I'm okay with him as a pass protector. I have not seen anything from him in the last 2 to 3 years that would give me any kind of confidence that he's capable of anything but spot duty in a blowout, and he wasn't capable of that today. It's disappointment.
And it's too bad. The fumble, of course, blew the shutout, and it was bad for him as a young man because he felt he'd let his teammates down and everything. But he needed to go out there and have about 10 carries, mopping up here, and rush for about 90 yards. Right. Is he capable of doing that?
No.
I don't know. Probably
not.
Not. We don't know. And the answer is we don't know because we didn't get a chance to see it because he fumbled it. That's where you lose player development. Right. You'd have liked to, if you're coming out of this and he's got one of those, Blake Easler, Scott Seltzer mop-up duty where he's averaging 8 yards a carry, that's pretty, and you can build off that. And had a chance to do it, left it on the carpet.
I promise you that Blake Easler is in better shape than he is.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, that's one thing about Blake Easler. He took care of his body, and when he was ready to go in, he was ready to go in. That guy looked like a running back. Jordan Simmons looks like an outer-shape running back. He's
not really cut. I mean, some running backs, usually they're pretty cut like Nathan Carter is. Simmons, I mean, I don't want to talk about his physique all that much, but he's been around a long time. I give him credit for hanging around, but was unable to answer today, and he felt really bad about it. And then they give it to Prim, his first carries of his career, and you saw what happened. Michigan State, hey, Mangum and Berger are out, and they're one tweak away from losing their top 3 running backs. I'm not predicting anything, but that's just the way it is. And there's a lot of teams around the country that if you take the top 3 running backs out, you're right back into a situation like last year when you have too much attrition at one position, and it's September 9th. You're getting into some thin ice situations.
Meanwhile, Eli Collins is languishing at Oklahoma State where he's doing absolutely nothing. I'm not saying that in this certain situation, Eli Collins would be welcome in the program.
Yeah, they could use him right now. I mean, I understand why he left and why they felt they had room for him to leave. And if he had stayed, he left after they brought in Mangum and Carter, correct? They brought in those two, and he was still part of it, and then he left afterwards, I think. But anyway, 4 or 5 scholarship running backs, that's what most teams carry. Simmons and Prim have been around. When you look back at roster development, it's not a problem yet because Carter looks real good. But these are things that coaches have to figure out. These are things that they talk about in their war room about how they're going to use their 85 scholarships, how they're going to put together a roster. Last year they went out after Kenneth Walker had a great season. Michigan State went into the portal and got who they thought was the best running back in the portal that they could get, which was Broussard. They were interested in the Gibbs kid that plays for the Lions out of Georgia Tech. He goes to Alabama. Hard to compete with Alabama for a guy like that. But when you just had Kenneth Walker just win 11-2, you make a run at something like that. It doesn't work out. They went after Broussard, gave him a nice NIL package, brought him in. He ended up being third string and not very productive. In retrospect, now these guys, coaches and general managers, the player personnel strategists and all that stuff, they're learning as they go because the portal is still a new thing, and they're still experimenting, and some people just kind of reload with the portal. Some teams try to go portal every single year, and they end up being TCU one year and TCU the next. In retrospect, they spend that scholarship on Broussard. What if they had planted that seed in high school running back that year, and that kid is a sophomore right now? He can play what if all up and down the lineup. What if these guys don't get hurt? But any little mistake here or there, there's 50-50. You make a decision one way, you just make a decision that way, and sometimes things can bite you, sometimes they can help you. But right now, Michigan State's 2-0, 2 blowouts, but the running back situation is precarious.
And Jalen Barberin is on the scout team as a true freshman, but I just don't see that.
If he was ready, we would have saw him today.
Exactly. The thing about that, the thing that kind of bothers me about like some of the portal running backs is I feel like running back is the one position where if you're good enough, you can play as a true freshman. So if and with the amount of skill players as people are bringing in, there are running backs available out there, I believe, and so it would be nice to see some young talent in addition to some old talent. I understand why Michigan State did what they did, but now you can see why they're in a really tough spot. Now, maybe Nathan Carter stays healthy. Maybe it's not that big of a deal. I do firmly believe that even if he doesn't get 30 carries against Washington, it's nice to give him a break, and not have him be, have all the stressful carries.
If he gets 30, they're in good shape. That means Washington's probably fumbled some snaps or something.
Right. And that's another thing with the number of with the way the clock works right now. if both teams are running them or whatever, it's really hard to get a lot of running back carries.
Yeah, so Michigan State today, Spencer Brown did not start the second half. Ethan Boyd, who's been coming on strong, gets the start in the second half and plays pretty much the entire second half. Maybe not at the very end, but Spencer Brown is a guy who started for the end of 2021, all of last year, the beginning of this year. Good, functional, solid player. 2 holding penalties. The guy behind you is knocking on the door. It's a good message also up front that no jobs are safe. You got some young people rising. Brandon Baldwin last week had a couple of mistakes. Today I didn't notice any. But Michigan State comes out 4 of the first 6 running plays gained 1 yard or less. I think 2 or 3 were negative yardage plays. So, Michigan State's run operation matched up against the one thing that Richmond does well, which is stop the run, which is great for Michigan State from a developmental standpoint. In terms of the run game, they saw, a decent opponent to go against, and they didn't dominate. Ended up rushing for 160 yards. Carter had a big day. A couple of long ones, padded those stats. But it's not like Michigan State was chunking, gain of 8, gain of 10, gain of 8, gain of 10. They had some negative plays. So the run game operation, when they grade film, there's going to be some negatives in there too.
Especially the first half. I mean, when you look at the first half, it was not good. And we talk about the tight ends. We talk about, Spencer Brown with the holding calls. But I think, too, you look at the strength of what the purported strength of this offensive line, the middle of it. You got Nick Samak. You've got guys that have been around a long time, like J.D. Duplain. They've got to get more push up there. They got to be better. And Richmond did have a veteran physical defensive line. There's no doubt in my mind that there's some guys in that front 7 for Richmond that could play in the Big Ten. I think they had some good. They got good linebackers as well, and they're smart players. And so there's no fool's gold in this thing for Michigan State. And I will say this as well. Lots of times when people put rushing yards up on the board, it does start out slow and it builds. And, so Michigan State's credit, I think they did some good things in the second half. But a lot of the runs that Nate Carter did get, the 44-yarder, that was nice. That was well blocked up. But there was a 21-yarder, I believe, or something like that, where pretty much it was all him. He made 2 guys miss in the backfield and then scooted out. He had a lot of tough runs. I thought Michigan State did some good things overall on offense, but now the big test, is Washington. Can you do that? You talk about these young receivers being ahead of schedule. I think they are to some regard, but generally when you face a Pac-12 team, they generally have good coverage guys. They have good athletes in the back end. Can those guys do the same thing against better athletes? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, and we'll talk about Washington on Monday, the VCast, after the press conference. Trey Mosley bounced back, had a drop last week, 5 catches, looked real good on a number of occasions. The first touchdown, little post number. I really liked this pass that Kim made, left hash mark on a slot out when they kind of left him uncovered a little bit. Kim was on it right away and threw a rope. I mean, that looked like one of those Brian Hoyer ropes all the way across the field. Kim can make you pay if you leave somebody open, and it was good to see Trey Mosley for him come through and establish himself as the best pass catcher today. They can certainly build off of that. Interesting that, Vandermark, the starting right guard, got a little banged up, came off the field, went back into the game, and played center. Fincher played a little bit after Samak did. That was interesting that they took a look at that. I don't know what that means.
I expected to see that earlier this year.
So if they have to go to that at some point, do they feel better about, Big Dooley Phillips coming in at right guard, or is it just to spread out the repetition so people stay fresh? Do they think that's a long-term solution or a good plan B in case Samak gets dinged up again instead of Fincher? I don't know the answers to that, but it's interesting that they invested some reps in Vandermark at center today.
I think I kind of feel like there's there's a little bit of a hint that move makes me think that they feel like they need to get bigger bodies and more push and more physicality on the right side of that offensive line. If you put if you put Vandermark, move him inside a little bit, and you get a guy like Big Dooley out there, Christian Phillips, that gives you a little bit more mass. And I think maybe at times it's been a little bit too easy for decent defensive lines or defensive linemen to kind of win stalemates or not. You want to see Michigan State's offensive line pushing guys off the ball. You want to see them getting good movement, and I think Michigan State needs more of that. And if you're not doing it against Central Michigan, you're not doing it against Richmond, then you've got to at least explore other avenues of getting the job done.
Yeah, St. can do Duplain, the big veterans. St. Mac's been dinged up a little bit, but they, Duplain had a couple of negative plays last week. He's a good, venerable player, but like you said earlier, those two haven't really been as dominant as they would like to be, and I'm sure that they're looking as much as anybody to get that done. So that's a run game. As far as defense goes, I mentioned in the pre-snap read that Richmond's offensive line was really bad, and expected Michigan State's pass rushers to have a productive statistical day, and they did. I think Michigan State had 12 or 13 tackles for loss, 7 sacks.
7 sacks.
So they're pushing the pocket pretty good. Let him get out a little bit a couple times. That was a problem against Central Michigan also, a couple of near sacks. Let the quarterback get out. I'd have to look at it again as to whether Michigan State failed in terms of containment errors or people being overzealous. I'm not sure if that was the case or not. Did you look at that?
There were a couple containment errors. I felt like Tumuse Adelaide in the first half. There was one where he was sucked inside and it got out. I feel like maybe his eyes were wrong on that, but the quarterback for Richmond, I give the guy a lot of credit. He got his butt kicked today, all over the field, but he kept on scrapping, and he did refuse to go down. He's tough, and he's got a little bit of wiggle to him for a guy that size, and I give them a lot of credit. Richmond, they were disappointed with how they played at Morgan State, and they wanted to come out and do some stuff. But I thought overall, Michigan State did a lot of good things. I think one of the things that they're going to have to look at as a defensive line this week is which combinations they can use against Washington without getting burned. And you look at some of the defensive ends. Adelaide's got a lot of potential. I believe he's got a lot of eligibility too left. But you look at some of the guys out there like Zion Young, Brandon Wright, Chris Bogle. Those are the guys. Like even Avery Dunn. Those more veteran guys. Physical guys that have had a little bit of experience. Those are kind of the guys that you want out there, in a game like this against a Washington, because you don't want guys getting suckered into doing some stuff and losing contain, because that can fall apart on you really big, really fast, and it can result in some really big plays against Washington. Yeah,
we just plain have not seen this Michigan State secondary tested at all against Central Michigan and Richmond. The two teams, whether it be schematics or lack of personnel or young quarterbacks that are unsettled. Just in Michigan State playing a lot of cover 4 and some cover 2 today also. A shell that doesn't give you a lot of space. Michigan State mixed in some man-to-man today and had a 2-linebacker blitz and almost gave up a big play. And Tatum did a good job leveraging the thing and preventing it from getting out for a big play. I think that one went for 20 yards. But for the most part, the secondary, any tests they've had since the Penn State game have been in practice, and we don't know what it looks like. Dylan Tatum looks pretty good. He's physical. Chuck Brantley, we've seen him for a couple of years. We know what he is. The safeties are still learning as they go. Harlan Barnett told us on Tuesday that those two guys stayed on the field against Central Michigan, Mangum and Spencer, because they wanted to soak them with communication and soak them with reps. They're learning as they go to get ready for this test against Washington. And you can go against Michigan State's receivers and Noah Kim, but Michigan State doesn't do a ton of ones versus ones, to the ground and everything, where something truly gets out on you and you've got to get it to the ground. So there'll be some learning there. And Washington, they go 40 points and 400 yards passing against everybody.
Yeah, the thing that when you have young safeties, I go back to the Central Michigan game, the touchdown that was scored on Michigan State, that's something that they hadn't seen from Central Michigan on film. So, that's one of the things that you see with young safeties a lot. If it's not on film and they're not aware of a team doing that, then it's really hard for them to adjust on the fly because they haven't had as much experience. Let's say Xavier Henderson, who's played, 1,000 snaps or whatever or more at the collegiate level. So he's seen just about everything. So, it can be an issue. I think one of the things like with Washington, it's going to be Michigan State's linebackers have to be very effective and have to do their part in the pass defense, because a lot of the stuff that Washington does is, you get a bunch formation over here, and they just try to create personnel advantages. You got to get off the blocks, but linebackers have to help out in some of the underneath pass coverage, because Washington doesn't really run the football. It's more like a pass, like a passing rushing attack.
They'll pass to set up the run.
Yeah, and they don't run the football a lot. It's just kind of like what they used to do at Washington State back in the day.
Yeah, and they're dynamic, and The quarterback, Penix, we've seen him here
He
before.
threw the ball so quickly, accurately.
He's a rope, and he's smart, and they've got a great system, so it's going to be a big challenge. Michigan State, with the pass defense, we don't really know what they can do. We don't know if they can stand up against those guys. We'll find out in a hurry. Chances are they're going to get a lesson from Washington. Maybe they'll register some hits, and maybe Michigan State's pass rush will have some things dialed up at the right time that moves them off the point. But that guy's a guy that can buy time and still deliver on the move. We'll talk more about Washington again, like I said.
The other thing you can't account for, and we've seen this over the years, when a team comes in and beats you handily, and you don't have some of the personnel that you had the year before, they might be taking you lightly or thinking, that type of thing. We've seen that with Michigan State and Ohio State when both teams were really good. 2014, Ohio State comes in here. Beats Michigan State that beat them in the Big Ten Championship in 2013. The next year, Ohio State, I felt like in 2015, Michigan State went down there, and I felt like maybe Michigan State was taken a little bit lightly by those guys. You just don't know what the mindset of those teams is coming in there. Like Washington's in a completely different spot than they were last year, where they weren't really being talked about. That was the game that Washington played against Michigan State that really put them on the map and put them, set the trajectory for the rest of their season. Michigan State was a team with a lot of hype coming off the 11 wins. Michigan State's going to be in that hunter mode, and they're going to be really hungry to try to prove themselves coming up in this next week. So you just don't know how the psychology aspect of it will play into this game.
Yeah, and I guess nice to see Jonathan Kim, boom, went in from 52, hit the crossbar and over. That was a big lift, putting Michigan State up 17-0. Special teams, Michigan State had to delay a game on an extra point. Almost had to delay a game on that 52-yarder, right, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. It got snapped at 1 second, or as the clock was going to 0. So that was kind of scary. Special teams overall this year, so far in the first 2 weeks, have been, I think, a positive for Michigan State. Punting has been good. I thought Ackley was going to be pretty good, but it's been solid. Coverage has been pretty solid. Return game has been solid. And then obviously recovering the muffed punt today, that was a big deal for Michigan State. But special teams has been much better than it was last year, and it had to be, because last year it was abysmal.
There's a big question mark. Question marks coming into the season. The punter, you had faith in him. You scouted him correctly in the spring scrimmage. The kicker, people had their fingers crossed. He's been so good so far. Return game, like you said, that's been a positive. Question mark. Receivers, they've been a positive. Question mark. Quarterback, that's been a positive. The run game and the offensive line was expected to be something to be relied upon, and it's not just the offensive line; it's the tight ends, the whole operation, and they're working on that to get the proper motivation and the accountability and the quality control down to make that part good in order for Michigan State to become what they want to be. But it's interesting that the X factors have come through. That one, not yet. Same pageness on defense. I wasn't sure about that. They've not had great tests. They've mixed in more two-deep zone. They've been solid with it. They've played 8 quarters of football. I don't think they've given up a play of more than 20 yards this season. Not playing against great competition, but that's what a good defense should do. So that's solid.
I mean, you're going to give up explosives, but if that's accurate, I didn't check and see if the plays today, if there was any over 20.
Today there was nothing over 20.
Okay, so there was nothing over 20 last year. So last week. So you can say they haven't played anybody, but I can think of a lot of games where they didn't play anybody that they gave up explosives. So that's a step in the right direction. I firmly believe that the cohesion between the linebackers and the defensive backs is much better. I think the communication is much better.
Now without Windman.
Yeah, well, that's going to be an issue. But you still have Cal Halliday and Aaron Brule and Jordan Hall for being a freshman. I honestly feel better about Jordan Hall playing in this defense as a linebacker than I felt about Ben Van Sumeren last year. And I don't want to say that disrespectfully to Van Sumeren because, I think in a certain system he might have been a good fit. If he'd been a linebacker his entire career, he might have been good fit here. But I feel really good about Jordan Hall, his intelligence, and how he moves and fits with these guys out there, and he does a really nice job for Michigan State. It's different than a lot of freshmen. I think you've got to be a smart, intuitive, instinctive linebacker, and it takes a certain type of player to play in Scotty Hazelton's system. I think that's an area where Michigan State actually has real depth. Windman's out, but Brule, Halliday, and then Jordan Hall. That's a good deal for Michigan State.
Be better with Windman, of
Oh,
course.
heck yeah. There's no doubt about
They're
that.
going to miss him. He's a talker. He's a communicator. He's 245 pounds.
Exactly.
Sideline to sideline, he's good. And Michigan State is good when they can bring Brule off the bench. Brule is good, but now he's going to be on the field firstly. And like you said, Hall will be out there, but it's not. It's going to be a step down. Windman, had an upper body injury today. Injuries these days, they last more than a week. I don't know what it is. I can't speculate, and they're not going to tell us what the deal is, but I'm expecting Michigan State to go in there with the three that you mentioned at those two positions. And, Brule, before Windman was hurt, Brule today played some Sam linebacker in the 4-3 when Richmond went to two tight ends. Even though it wasn't like two back. Last year they went to a 4-3 against Wisconsin and a little bit against Illinois, a little bit against Michigan, and it looked pretty good. Today they went 4-3 against a team that wasn't two backs, but when they went two tight ends, and it usually morphed into him playing pass defense from the slot. You were not going to have Brule play pass defense from the slot against Washington, but his versatility was being well utilized. Next week it's going to be Angelo Gross in the slot, of course, and he's come around he dropped an interception today, but he's come around. He's always been pretty good defending the run as a defender in there at the slot. But Washington will isolate you as a slot defender, and Gross. That's not been a strength for him over the years. We'll see if he's grown from there. Chester Kimbrough started at that position for a couple of years, started at that position against Washington, and then by halftime he was out and back to third string for a month and then came back to the field when there were injuries. Kimbrough, second string today in nickel. He's going to be on the field against Washington as well. We'll see if he's grown or not. The test is coming, and it's going to come in a big way, and it's going to be out there without Windman, which is going to hurt. Anything else, Paul?
Yeah. They didn't have Windman at
I'm guessing.
They didn't have him at linebacker last year when they played him.
How'd it look?
Pretty bad. But I will say this. The cohesiveness with Halliday and Brule wasn't ready to play linebacker against those guys. I don't think Halliday was. And so you really would like to have Windman for this game. But I still feel like even without him, linebacker's way further along than it was last year at the same time from a cohesiveness standpoint. And but yeah, definitely you would like to have them out.
So they'll have a chance to surprise everybody next week, including us, have a chance against a really good top 10 opponent. Even if you come up short but you're impressive, that can look good or whatever. But I agree with you, and we've been saying it all summer, that the litmus test is not this week against Washington. Everybody's going to be saying that. We'll find out what Michigan State has when they play. We're going to find out what Michigan State has when they play Washington. Man, there's a lot of good teams that'll play Washington and come up 20 points short. Not everybody. I mean, there's teams in the Pac-12 that a lot of those scores end up being close. But, Arizona State game last year. I think it was Arizona State. But that is not the litmus test. It's the week after against Maryland. That is going to be the game that, in my opinion, gives an indication as to whether Michigan State's going to be 5-7, 6-6, 7-5, or potentially better. Now, if they come out and beat Washington, then I'll take all those words and throw them away.
It's still a litmus test, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you handle success? It's a different type of test, but it's your first conference game, so.
But you beat Washington. That's like getting an eagle on hole number 3 or something, right? To use a golf analogy. Does that work?
You can say that, but the worst thing about getting an eagle on hole number 3 is when you go back and get a bogey on hole number 4.
All right.
So
we will learn about the secondary, but the team as a whole next week is going to be a really interesting test. But it's a part of it.
I just want to say this, and I'm going to say it a lot this week. The one thing that you won't learn about this secondary is how good the secondary is based on how many yards they give up, because Michigan State's going to give up a lot of passing yards. If you're playing off coverage or you're playing certain areas and you've got a veteran quarterback, he's going to go to the area where you're weakest in pass defense. And you see it time and time again in every single football game you watch. And I don't understand why it bothers people so much. When it happens against Michigan State, when you see it every game. If your pass rush doesn't get home and you're playing a cover 4 or something like that, you're gonna, why are people surprised if the ball's getting completed over the middle for first downs?
They've played less man-to-man this year. I wonder if that's going to continue. At some point, like even D'Antonio used to say, at some point you got to play man-to-man.
I think you're going to see more. I think as they get into this, I think they're going to see more. You're going to see more mixed coverage. Now, the downside of that, the potential downside of that with young safeties is the more advanced your coverage is, and the more you're changing coverages, the more likelihood there is of half your secondary playing one coverage and other half playing another, and that's
missing a signal or something.
That's where busts happen when you get this side is playing man to man and this side's playing zone, and you're like, what the heck is that? And so one of the things I found that's pretty interesting is when you talk to guys like Jaden Mangum or Malik Spencer, the whole thing that's been emphasized to them since like Jim Salgado came in and Harlan Barnett's emphasized it as well. But if you're going to get your coverage call wrong, make sure that everyone's playing the wrong coverage, as opposed to one half playing one coverage, the other half playing the other coverage. That's where big plays happen. That's where defensive backfields fall apart. It's not the yardage you're giving up. It's when guys aren't on the same page. So I think that's going to be something big to watch, because the communication aspect is going to be very, very important for Michigan State to not give up ginormous busts.
All right, so Michigan State 2-0, another blowout. Not as dominant as those of us wanted to see that grade hard, and Michigan State's coaches grade hard. They're going to want more than this, and they know they need to be better than this if they're going to hang in the game against a very good Washington team. So 2-0, like they were last year, a couple of nice cushions of victory. They've some playmakers have flashed. Now they need to keep tightening screws and improve from week 2 to week 3, and we'll be checking it out, and we'll be covering it. Hey, I forgot to mention, subscribe to this channel, give us a like, over to SpartanMag.com, become a subscriber, become a member. We'd like to have you be a member over at Spartan Mag. Join the fun over there. We'd like to have you talking some serious Michigan State sports, serious Michigan State football. Anything else, Paul? For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. I've been watching the VCast from East Lansing with the Spartans for SpartanMag.com.